Welcome back to the WNBA playoff preview show here on Audacy Sports as this week-long wait is almost over for the Las Vegas Aces to take on the Seattle Storm in a highly anticipated matchup. And let's get some insight on this series and the WNBA as a whole from one of the best in the business, and I say that truthfully and sincerely, from ESPN. I'm just saying, it's the truth, Alexa, from ESPN covering women's basketball. Alexa, here we go with the last name pronunciation. Philippou. Philippou, I got it right?
Yes.
Let's go. This interview, first 15 seconds is fire, and I'm not even done with the intro. Alexa Philippou is joining us. Alexa, thank you so much for the time. How are you doing? How excited are you for this Final Four in this WNBA playoffs?
Oh, yeah. I can't wait. It's been weird not to have games the last few days and to just kind of be waiting for the semis to start, but I think the wait is going to be worth it because we have some really exciting matchups coming up.
100%. And before we get into this Final Four, I'm just curious when it comes to the first round, and this year was a transition year from the single elimination to the 3-game series. I'm curious. I know James Wade of the Chicago Sky said before their first round matchup, he didn't really like the format of it. In terms of the home games and away games and the situation that puts some of the higher seeds in. What's your take on that, though?
Well, we have a small sample size of only 1 year, but I think the better team prevailed through each of the first-round games, even though some of the series did go to a decisive 3-game or Game 3. So in some ways, it's like, okay, what was expected to happen happened. I think that having some of those matchups or some of those teams being single elimination games could have been more risky than having them to go on the road and, have to pull out of Game 3. So I'm really interested to see what it looks like long-term and what trends we see emerge. Maybe it's not the ideal format, which would be maybe 1-1-1 where you're going back and forth, but because of the travel situation right now in the WNBA, I'm not totally opposed to this. Even though I did like the single elimination games for like the really early rounds, maybe not for like some of the better teams to be in, but I think that what kind of was expected or maybe should have happened based off like who were the clear better teams ended up happening this round or this year, and I think that's okay for now. So I think it's in a good spot.
And as we transition into the Aces and Storm series, let's get a little spicy real quick. Alexa, truthfully, who do you believe is the MVP this year?
I voted for Asia Wilson.
Okay,
so
Vegas loves you.
I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to some Vegas folks, but it was really hard. I thought that Brianna Stewart also had a really strong case, and I was going back and forth for a while. But I think at the end of the day, we tend to recognize MVPs as like the best player or the player who propels the best team to success, and that ended up being the Aces. And she's gotten it done on both ends of the floor. And yes, she has help around her, but I didn't really think that was enough to kind of detract from, I think what was really like a just incredible season from Wilson. So I did vote for Asia.
All right, let's go. Vegas approves. I can hear it now. And with that, let's go straight into this series. Of course, a few weeks ago, the regular season finale, Sue Bird's final game. It was on ABC. It broke an attendance record for the Aces with over 10,000 people at the game. It was the most viewed regular season WNBA game since 2008. And there was playoff seeding implications for both teams. Today, you've seen it everywhere throughout social media. A combined 7 number 1 picks in the draft in this series, which is not only a WNBA record, it is an NBA record as well. So simply put, Alexa, it simply does not get better than this, right?
Oh, no. I think this could easily have been a final series. It's wild that this is going to be a semifinal matchup, but I mean, you can't ask for anything more than this. You have the history of these teams facing off back in 2020 for the title, but both teams are different. Some of the major players are the same, but I mean, the Aces in particular, I think, are really different. They're totally night and day from 2020, and I'm intrigued to see. I mean, it's going to be. There's just so many storylines between that. You have, Becky Hammond just won Coach of the Year today. Can she kind of get the Aces to the title game? And if she does succeed in leading them to a championship, she'd be the first head coach since Van Chancellor in the inaugural season of the WNBA to win a title in their first year. So there's that kind of thing to look for. But then also the Storm have Sue Bird about to retire, and everyone, of course, I'm sure in Seattle wants Sue Bird to go out with one last title. And Tina Charles is also fighting for her first. So there's so many storylines, and there's going to be some really great basketball, I think, to come in that series.
And with all that being said, from the outlook and kind of having a week to digest and go into all these matchups, what are the key factors that you're looking at for either team as we head into this series on Sunday?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how the Aces do defensively, because whenever you hop on a media call or some sort of availability with Becky Hammond, she's always talking about how she wants more or expects more from her team's defense. And I think that's always interesting because the Aces get so much attention on the offensive end. Everyone's talking about how they shoot threes and they're playing this like awesome style basketball, but she's really mostly concerned with how they're doing in the defensive end. So I'm curious about that. And I think there's some interesting X factors here too. In terms of the Storm, I would be really interested to see how Jewell Loyd does, because she's had some really high highs and really low lows, I felt like, this season, and whether or not we see the kind of Jewell Loyd that we all know to be true, the former number one pick, and just someone who can wreak havoc offensively and defensively. I think that gives us the Storm a really good shot. But if she's not impactful, then I think that really lends itself in the Aces' favor. So there's a lot of interesting moving parts there, but definitely going to be a good series for sure.
And even with Jewell Loyd, like going up against the Aces, the second to last game that they played, the third game out of the 4 they played this season, I believe Jewell Loyd, she played 30 minutes. She only had 1 point. And then in the finale, she went off for 38. So you get both sides of the spectrum. And earlier today, the general manager of the Aces was here locally in Las Vegas, appeared on a radio station, and said Dearica Hamby is going to be out for this series, dealing with the bone bruise. They said 2 to 4 weeks, technically today, just for everyone listening, because I know this is airing on Saturday. It is Friday, which means it has been 15 days since that injury. They said 2 to 4 weeks. I know Becky Hammond is going to speak to the media here in an hour to get more transparency and I guess to confirm. But that kind of plays into the thing that's kind of been looming and on my head throughout this entire season, despite all the success that the Aces have had, is this team doesn't have a lot of depth, and more fatigue becomes a bigger factor. And even looking at Asia Wilson, if we go back to when Becky, before the end of the regular season, when she switched out and put Kia Stokes into the starting lineup for Dearica Hamby, it was interesting, and a lot of people were like, well, maybe she can handle Tina Charles a little bit better. And without Dearica being in there, that just adds to this fatigue factor. So for you, is that a big concern heading into this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, even though Dearica didn't have a super strong last little stint there before her injury, I do think the depth of the Aces remains a big question. I'm not one of those people that feels like you need to have the deepest team to win. Sometimes I feel like if you do whatever you're really good at so well, and if you continue to do that during the postseason, that might be enough. So I don't think that's a huge reason for Aces fans to be, to start to totally panic. But I do think losing a player like Hamby does obviously present some issues in terms of like what she brings to the floor. She's so good at creating her own offense, getting on the glass, defensively. She's versatile. So there are some concerns there. I think Kia Stokes has done a pretty good job, and obviously the Aces have continued to have success even with Hamby out, but it's not exactly the sort of absence that you're hoping for in a big series like this. So it does remain a question, but at the same time, the Storm aren't necessarily the deepest team in the league either. Maybe I think they probably play more players longer for longer stretches than the Aces do, but they're not maybe not in the most kind of impactful ways. So I'm not sure if that necessarily will help the Aces, but it is just another factor on the other side too. So it'll be really interesting to see. And then if they do advance, are they going to, is Hamby going to be back for the finals? That would be a whole other question, and what form, of course, she'd be in by then. But that's a problem to worry about later.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully a problem that they're going to have to deal with. And as you're talking, I'm just curious, like with Washington going up against Seattle, obviously Washington isn't as a how do I say this? A transitional, fast-paced team like the Aces. No one is. The Aces are the number one team in transition in the league, and Washington was more methodical. In terms of Seattle having to deal with the Aces, do you think it's going to be a big adjustment going from polar opposites with Washington and the Aces now?
Well, it might be an adjustment kind of on paper, but the Storm are such an experienced team, and they can play that way. We've seen them kind of do that before. That I think they're going to be prepared to do it, and they have all this time now. Obviously, the Aces did too, because both those series ended in 2 games. But they'll be ready to roll, and I'm really interested. I think more so than pace, the kind of perimeter threats that Vegas has and how that will challenge Seattle. And if Seattle, I don't think at this time know the status of Gabby Williams, who's one of their best defenders. That's another thing to look out for too. Is will she play, and how are you going to slow down? I've been calling it the Vegas backcourt big 3, because now that Chelsea Gray is just going off the way she has, I think you can have your own big 3 just from the backcourt, and then of course you still have Asia Wilson doing her thing down low. But that's going to be a really interesting matchup for Seattle, and that's where I think that's going to be a huge matchup too. How they try and slow down that backcourt, in particular with their perimeter defense.
And I love how you say the backcourt big 3, because I'm biased, obviously, covering the team and being here in Las Vegas, and I'm trying to poke holes into this team, the Aces, that is. And I'm kind of wondering, one thing that I've enjoyed within this past 7-game win streak ever since the Commissioner's Cup victory in Chicago has kind of been how, whether it's Chelsea Gray, whether it's Asia, whether it's Jackie Young, whether it's Kelsey Plum, they've kind of picked each other up, where, for instance, if Kelsey Plum has a bad first quarter, it doesn't matter, because Jackie Young's going to go off for 10-plus points in the quarter, and then the person struggling, whoever that may be, still keeps that confidence because the offense is still being successful. Is that something that is going to be sustainable? Granted, it has been all year. Do I have any reason to believe that might stop?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the camp of, it's worked this well for them so far. Again, it's going to be challenging to go up against the Storm's defense, and up against, if they were to face Chicago or Connecticut in the finals. Those are also 2 tough defensive teams in different ways. But I just think there's something to be said about how the Aces, they don't have as much depth in terms of who they go to on their bench, but you do have various players who can step up at different times, and I've really proven that already. And there's some sort of just clutch factor and a trust in each other that I know Becky Hammond's really tried to instill in her culture this year, that I think that could go a long way. Will it be enough? Who's to say? We'll have to see about that. But I think it certainly bodes well for their ability to respond to adversity in the postseason.
Alexa Philippou joining us from ESPN, covering all women's basketball. Be sure to follow her at Alexa Philippou. And before we get you out of here, it's the moment of truth, Alexa. I need a prediction for both semifinals as we hit the Final Four stage of these WNBA playoffs.
Well, I'm officially on the record as having the Sky winning the one series and the Aces beating the Storm in the other semifinal. And I actually have, and this is online, so I'm going to stick with my guns here with my gut, but I do have the Aces. That was my prediction to win it all. So I'm even though the Storm looks really good in the first round, the Sky have been looking really good. The Sun, you can't count out. I'm going to stick to my guns, and that's my prediction. So maybe I'll eat crow, but
you are
with that for now.
You are buttering up this Las Vegas audience, and I'm not mad at it at all, Alexa.
I swear I'm not pandering. This was all done before this interview.
Yeah, and it's online, like you said, and this will never go away. It will be available on the Audacy app. But Alexa, sincerely, I appreciate all the coverage that you give for the league throughout the entire year. Super informative. I hope the Aces make it to the finals, because then that means you have to join us for our WNBA Finals preview show. But thank you so much for sparing some time during this busy time of the season.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
Of course. There it is. Alexa Philippou, one of the best in the business, and I say that truthfully and sincerely again, from ESPN covering women's basketball. Alexa Philippou. More hesitation on pronouncing guests' last names and more illustrious guests on the way. It is your Audacy Sports WNBA playoff preview show.